Okay guys, first I have to apologize about the bad sound quality, but I'm using the microphone of the laptop and there is a bit of an echo. It's not that the microphone is bad, but this is how it is when you use such microphones. So, adding a JavaScript client to our application, just let's recall what do we have right now. So in our project, actually, so far we have 3 or 4 projects if I remember correctly. So we have here quick start. In the source we have API client, which is a console client for the identity server, our own identity server. Oh, thanks God I have the Zoom running, and MVC client. So let's continue with the fun. Now we have 2 clients, one identity server which is protecting the resources of the API. MVC client is interactive client, which requires the resource user to go to the identity server, supply his credentials, and after that the identity server gives the token to the MVC client, which can on its turn access the API. Okay, this is the client, which is a console application, and it represents server-to-server communication with the API. This one is interactive communication with the API and the identity server. Of course, all the clients communicate with the identity server. Now we'll have a third client, which is just JavaScript client without back channel. We'll have only front channel. Okay, let's do that. For any prerequisites like example Gravity, templates, let's look the overview, blah blah. This quick start will show you how to build a browser-based JavaScript client application, sometimes referred to a single-page application. The best will be to build it with Blazor, with C# probably for us, or can build it with Angular, React, Vue, whatever. So the main point here is that JavaScript is a different language. The project could be Python. It doesn't matter. As soon as we find a suitable OpenID Connect and OAuth 2.0 Python library, for example, we can use our identity server because the protocol is the same. Invoke the web API with an access token issued by identity server and log out of identity server. All of this will be driven from the JavaScript running in the browser. Okay, perfect. The project for JavaScript client. Okay, so now we have to create the project. Let me open the PowerShell. Let me go to div projects. I'm gonna do this entirely with Visual Studio Code. I'm not gonna run Visual Studio Prime. So here we have trash. Here we have quick start, and here we have our application, which is in source. Those are all our applications. So I have to create a JavaScript client. I did it. So we have the folder JavaScript client, which is one empty folder. Now we have to go to this folder. We have to change the directory. We have to make this folder our present working directory, change directory, ls present working directory. Okay, we are in the project sorry, JavaScript client, and we have to run .NET new web. So let me read this just shortly. Quickly create the new projects for a JavaScript application. It can simply be an empty web project, an empty ASP.NET Core application, or something else like Node.js application. This quick start will use ASP.NET Core application. I could add here, it could be, for example, Python application or PHP application, Java application. It doesn't really matter. Of course, if it's such application, then we are not talking about only the front end or single page application, but in any case, you get the idea. Actually, the client could be anything. Create a new empty ASP.NET Core application in the source directory of Visual Studio, or do this from the command line. I'm gonna do it from the command line. .NET new web application. Okay, so the application has been created. Look at the files. Aubergy properties, app settings, development JSON, app settings JSON, JavaScript client, C# project, program, CS, and startup. Notepad. Let's look startup. .cs. So this is how it looks when empty project JavaScript. We don't have syntax highlighting. Sorry about that. Plus startup. Let's see, public configure services. As you can see, dependency injection doesn't have any services. And here in the middleware pipeline, what do we have is development, blah, blah, is gonna say hello world if you start it, but it's not using controllers, it's not using Razor pages, anything. So that's it, the very simple start. App settings, what else do we have to do here? As we have done before with other client projects, add this project also to your solution. Yeah, of course, if we'll run this with Visual Studio Prime, we want this project to be visible. We go to the quick start where the SLN file is, and from here we'll say, what do we have to say here? Did I copy this? I did. .NET solution app, JavaScript client, okay. Prosh file, it's done. Let's go to the source. Let's go to our JavaScript file. Let's stay in this folder. Okay. Modifying hosting. Okay, now modify the JavaScript client project to run on port 5003. As we know already, we just have to go to the properties, ls. Why don't we use actually Notepad++? With bare hands is gonna be a little bit more difficult. So code for JavaScript, we can use Sublime Text, we can use Visual Studio Code, we can use something else. And this is actually one of my motivations to actually use only Visual Studio Code, because it's gonna be a JavaScript project. So MVC client, identity, these are the release notes. Let's close all this because I'm getting confused here. Okay, everything is closed. I have source, and into the source I have all my projects, which are API, which we are protecting with IdentityServer. We have console client, we have JavaScript client, now we have MVC client. Okay, let's go there. Let's go to the properties, launch settings, and 5003. As far as I remember, I changed. JSON doesn't allow comments, so that's why I'm not commenting. But as far as I remember, in MVC client, in the properties, I did use already port 5003, and I don't want to mess up with this port, so I'm gonna remove this. Right now, the JavaScript application is using 5003, and my MVC application was using 5003 for not secure connection, so I just removed that. So there are no conflicts. If I forget, for example, to do something, to change the port on MVC. Right now I don't need MVC client, so I'm probably not gonna run it. We won't stumble upon problems, but eventually in the future I may forget, so that's why I'm gonna try to make my life easy. Okay, so now it's ready to run on 5003, the JavaScript client. Let's continue. On the static file middleware, since our application is one empty web application, it doesn't know what to run, it doesn't have the structure and all this kind of stuff, it's not serving anything. So JavaScript application, let's go to the startup and let's comment out everything. This is what I usually do. Let's just add the middleware which is necessary to serve static files. Now, these files standardly will be served from the www root folder in my anti-JavaScript client web application. I don't even have such folder, so I'm gonna create it, www root folder. So I'm ready. Whatever I have in the www root folder will be accessible on localhost colon 5003 slash and the name of the file of the resource. Okay, this is enough. Now, how would we doing this with Apache, for example? In Apache, I'm going to create a folder, set up the config of Apache so it serves this folder, and I can put whatever I like there. This is another way to do it, but right now in the world of ASP.NET, we have to create one empty application. That's it. Given this project is designed to run client-side, all we need ASP core to do is to serve up the static HTML and JavaScript files. In fact, all we need is just one web server, and the web server is gonna be Castro. In the case we run it from the console. If we run it from Visual Studio, Prime is going to be Internet Information Services. As I said, this web server could be Apache, could be Nginx, could be anything. Okay, so the static file middleware is designed to do this. Register the static files middleware in startup. Okay, so for us it's enough to know that these two lines, actually these two spells, are enough to allow our empty application to serve static files. This middleware will now serve up static files from the applications folder. Notice this tilde, which means when we use it in the Razor pages, we have to use it exactly like that. It's a reference to the root of the application. This is where we will put our HTML and JavaScript files. In that folder does not exist in your project created now. Okay, I just created the folder. Okay, so now reference OpenID Connect client. Okay, now our client is going to be JavaScript. As you can remember, in applications like our client, our console application, our MVC application, we used Microsoft libraries to communicate with our identity server and to retrieve data from the resource API. Now, in JavaScript world, we have to do the same, and we expect to have such a libraries. We would expect this to have in PHP, in Java, in Python, you name it. In one of the previous quick starts in ASP.NET Core MVC-based client project, we used the library to handle the OpenID Connect protocol. In this quick start in the JavaScript client project, we need a similar library, except one that works in JavaScript and is designed to run in the browser. The OpenID client library. Okay, let me show you that. Identity model. Where is that identity model? Okay, so this is the library. Such is one such library. It is available in NPM, like NuGet Package Manager, but for the JavaScript world, and especially from Node.js world, Bower, which is another distribution dependency manager. This is a dependency manager. With this Bower, actually, you can use CSS, HTML, JavaScript libraries, whatever is necessary from the front end, or directly download it. Okay, so I will put the links in the description of the video. So those are directly downloadable files. Okay, so npm, we're gonna use the Node Package Manager, like NuGet Package Manager. If you want, Node Package Manager is the package manager for the JavaScript world. If you want to use npm, download the ODC client to run these commands from your JavaScript client project directly. Okay, so let me show you that. Ooh, what do I have here? Okay, so JavaScript client, look at the folders. Now, if you run npm, first you have to install it. Of course, I have it installed on my machine. If you don't have it, just go to npm and download it. I'm not gonna go through this right now, this process right now, but npm is gonna create one folder, and this is how I expect all dependency managers to work actually, to put the libraries into a folder which is called vendor, or in this case it's called node modules, whatever. That's why .NET Core just a little bit confuses me, because who knows where it puts all this. But if I run npm from the folder of the client, so let me go to the source, let me go to JavaScript, here we go, the same thing from the console, and I'm installing right now npm install OpenID Connect Client. Okay, so everything has been installed. If I do ls, we'll see node modules. If we go to node modules, we'll see all the dependencies. I asked only for IDC client, but this OpenIDC client actually has dependencies on base64, CoreJS, CryptoJS, universal unique ID, whatever. So let me go to OpenID's client and show you what do we have here. Distribution, change directory distribution. No wonder, no magic. I hate when it's magical and sorcery. We are not idiots. We want to understand, and as developers, we have to understand actually what's going on, because otherwise we feel lost. Okay, so let me go down. And now what we are gonna do is this dist folder we are gonna copy to www root, which is here. It's currently empty. As you can see, it's an empty folder. So what we are gonna do, from the folder node modules, OpenID Connect Client, distributions, we're gonna copy all the files. This is what this command does. Copy on the console, node modules, OpenID client, distribution. As you can see, the path is relative to the present working directory, and we are gonna copy this to www root. Okay, let's do that. It shouldn't take that much time, but whatever. So here we go, we have all these JavaScript files. ls again. Okay, let's continue. This downloads the latest OpenID client packages locally and then copies the relevant JavaScript files into www so that they can be served by your application. Manual download. If you want to simply download the OpenID client JavaScript files, manually browse to the GitHub. And we gotta go to this GitHub. Just copy these files and put it in www. That's it. This is done by no package manager. Download the JavaScript file. Once downloaded, copy them to www root so they can be served by your application. If we have to be precise, in our www root folder, it's a good idea to have JavaScript, CS, images folder, EMG, JS, CSS, and put these JavaScript files there in the JavaScript folder. Some people, even in JavaScript JS folder, put vendors or something. So this library, which we have to put in the folder, but this is a topic for another day. Manual download. Okay, we did that. Add your HTML and JavaScript files. Now we have to create the files, and each website actually has a file which is called index.html. Next is to add your HTML and JavaScript files to www root. By default, as I said, mostly the most popular web servers actually serve the file which is called index.html. So that's why we're going to create one index.html, and we will create another file which is used for the callback. So we will have two HTML files and one application-specific JavaScript file, in addition to the OpenIDC client library. www add the HTML files, This is the landing page of every application, web application. New file, I'm gonna create the files, and after that I'm gonna fill with data, callback with source code, callback. As you can guess already, this is used for OpenID Connect for the callback. Okay, and we will have app.js, which is gonna contain our JavaScript code. Okay, so that's it. Index.html. It's a quite simple file. This will be the main page in our application. It will simply contain the HTML for the buttons for the user to log in, log out, and call the web API, which we are going to access from this single page application. It will also contain the script tags to include our 2 JavaScript files. It will also contain pre used for showing messages to the user. And this is very simple HTML file, very minimalistic approach. This is the bare minimum which we need actually. So look at this now. We have doctype HTML, which tells the browser that this HTML5. We have HTML section, which contains all other elements, all other tags. We have head section, which has meta, charset, UTF-8, title. As you can see, we don't even have title. The CSS should be put in the head, and we have body, which is presented to the user, rendered, and actually all this is rendered to DOM, document object model, and after that presented to the user. Rendering engines, there are a lot of rendering engines. This is another topic. So we have one button which says login. To log in our user, log out, no, call API and log out. And here we go, we have one placeholder, pre, which is going to be used by our JavaScript here to render all the messages. And we include here the scripts, okay, at the end of the body. That's it. Application JSON. This is the most important, one of the most important. There are a lot of moving parts, so I cannot say that this is the most important JavaScript file or for our application. It is our custom. This will contain the main code for our application. The first thing is to add a helper function to log messages to the pref. Okay, this is the function which we use for logging. If you look at the function, you can pretty much understand everything. So document get element by ID. This is a method which comes with the window object. Document element by get element by ID results. And if you look at here, we have here what? ID results. This is how our JavaScript is going to get this tag. Is going to get access to this tag, and after that it says array prototype for each. JavaScript is very strange language. Actually, it's a very strange animal. It was since JavaScript 5. It is prototype based, classless, which is not true anymore. Object-oriented event development, event-oriented development. So for each call, arguments, function, this one lambda, which is going to be executed on each one of the arguments. Message, instance of error, else if, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I'm not going to go through all this code right now. Next, add the code to register click events. Here it is, the event-driven development. Again, we use 3 things in JavaScript. This is DOM manipulation, document object model manipulation, remoting, and dynamic behavior. Right now, we have DOM manipulation. We just get to the elements. Here we go. We get them by ID. This is how we refer them. And after that, we add dynamic behavior. We set add event listener. Okay, if somebody clicks this login button or whatever it is, Click is the event which happens. Login, execute the login function, which is going to be defined later on. And we say don't allow this event to continue its population, its propagation. That's all we say here. Propagation is the right word. Okay, so let's go back. Next, we can use user manager class from OIDC client. Okay, here we're gonna use right now whatever comes from this library which we installed with Notepad package manager. Library to manage the OpenID Connect protocol. It requires similar configuration that was necessary in the MVC clients. Okay, so let's do that. This is the configuration. We say, okay, the authority is localhost 5001, our identity server client ID, the name of our client. After we will register this client into our identity server, of course. Redirect URI localhost callback. Callback is HTML which we haven't finished yet. Response code, response type, code. Ooh, we are asking for code. It could be token, I believe, based on the Perpettini, but if they say code, that this is the right thing. OpenID, the scope, what we are asking for. OpenID, give me the profile and give me access to API 1. We need access token, not only the ID token. Post logout redirect URI. Okay, when I click logout, redirect me back to index.html. And after that, we leave the library to do the heavy lifting for us. That's it. That's the configuration. Next, the user manager provides a get user API to know if the user is logged into the JavaScript application now. It uses a JavaScript promise. As you can see, each library gives us the object which we have to instantiate, and after that, in this case, this is the manager. The same with entity manager. We have context there. This is the object which we use. Here we use this object which we just created, instantiated MGR. As you can see, MGR is our entry point to the world of OpenID Connect, and the magic comes from the library. The returned user object has a profile property which contains the claims for the user. Add this code to detect if the user is logged into the JavaScript application. Again, manager. We turn to the manager and we said get user 10. This is a promise in JavaScript, something like a sync and await in the world of C# for the guys which are coming from C#. Then function. Okay, get the user, and when you get it, execute this function, this lambda. In JavaScript, all the functions are lambdas. If user lock, we are calling this method, and this method on its turn actually is gonna print something here in the print. All the messages will be here, inserted here, and the user will see them. Okay, so that's it. User logged in, blah 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 blah. Okay, next we want to implement the login and API logout functions. The user manager provides a sign-in redirect to log the user in, and a sign-out redirect to log the user out. The user object that we obtain in the above code also has an access token property, which can be used to authenticate to a web API. The access token will be passed to the web API via the authorization header with the barrier scheme. Add this code to implement those 3 functions in our application. As I said, everything comes from the library which we're using right now. Now we're giving the bodies of these 3 functions, which we are calling here login, API, and logout. Here we go. Login, and we turn to the manager again, which comes from the library. I keep repeating this. Sign-in redirect, and when we try to access the API, we set manager get user 10 function user URL, and we turn to the API with the token, the magic happens from the manager. We do AJAX request, which is invisible for the user without refreshing the page. Open get, onload function, lock. This is our function here. And between the pre is gonna print whatever we get. Set request header, notice this. Authorization header, and we say barrier, and we use user access token. So in the headers, we are sending a value which is called a property, which is called authorization, and the name, the value, actually it's called barrier. So we sent a property. We have a property in the header which is called authorization, and its value it's equal to barrier plus the access token, and we send this asynchronous. Okay, so that's it. Actually, see the client credentials quick start. Let me see, what is this? This is server to server, as far as I remember. Yeah, protecting API using the client credentials. Why should we read that? For information on how to create the API used in the code above. Okay, callback HTML. The callback actually it's accessed by the identity server. Actually, it redirects the user to callback when the user successfully has been logged in. This HTML file is in destination redirect URI page. Once the user has logged into identity server, it will complete the OpenID Connect protocol signing a handshake with identity server. The code for this is all provided by the user manager class we used earlier. Once the signing is complete, we can then redirect the user back to the index.html page and this code to complete the signing process. Again, very simple. If we look at the code, we will see that it's simply redirecting back to index page. Let's save that. I did. Okay. Let's take a look. Again, the same. Document type for HTML5, HTML, head, body, and in between we have here, again, we load the client, and we have another script which says new OpenID Connect User Manager, response mode query, sign in redirect callback, 10 function, and catch function and console error. Windows location, index.html. In other words, just redirect. If there are errors, just is going to print on the console of development tools in the browser is going to print error. Okay, that's it. Actually, pretty simple. After client registration to identity server of the JavaScript client. Right now we have to register our client to our identity server. I'm gonna copy this code so the identity server knows this client. In other words, we go to the Google, Facebook, whatever, and we register our client application. Okay, let's go about this identity server. This is beauty actually, which I love. Is this identity server is our identity server, and I love that. Okay, so this is the client. Come on. Give me a break, JavaScript client. What did I do wrong? Mamma mia. Okay. So many errors. Oh my god. Yeah, here we go. What? Yeah, of course. So closing bracket or brace, opening brace. I didn't put it in the right position. That's all. Okay, so now I did it correctly. We have 3 clients so far registered in our identity server. We have machine-to-machine client, one quick start one, our console application. We have interactive ASP.NET Core client. This is our MVC application. Now we just added a new client. Let me actually copy the URL and put it here just to have it. We have right now a JavaScript client, and the client ID is JavaScript. If you remember, this is what we have here. This is the client ID. In JavaScript, the application will say that we are JavaScript application. Allowed grant type code. Required client secret. Notice this, we don't require secret for the front channel right now. Redirect URI, 5003 callback HTML, post logout redirect, okay, when it's logged out, allow it. Course origins. Notice this now. We have something which is called same domain policy for AJAX requests. In other words, AJAX request cannot be performed on another domain, and this is exactly what we're gonna do. So now we have this course. Okay, so cross-region resource sharing. This negotiation, actually, this trick or whatever I want to call this, about course origins. We inform the identity server that this client actually is gonna turn to another domain, which is 5000. Oops, allowed course origins. Yeah, we say that this client, which is running on 5003, actually is gonna require API resources on another domain, which is running on port 6001, as far as I remember. Yeah, our API. And now we say the same scope. So those are the resources protected by IdentityServer, and we say, okay, IdentityServer, allow this client actually to ask you for OpenID, for profile. And notice this, we need access token, not only ID token, we need access token to access this API1. And as you can see here, we have it in the scopes, API1. We could have named it differently, but this is what we did in the tutorial anyway. So allow AJAX call from the web API course. Now the main thing is that if somebody from a different domain tries to access your domain, you're not allowed to answer. Otherwise, attacks could be performed. So that's why we have this policy, same domain policy. To avoid this, we have to add in the middleware of the API of our resource something which will allow to serve such things. So one last bit of the configuration that is necessary is to configure course in the web API project. This will allow AJAX calls to be made from HTTP localhost 5003 to localhost 6001, where our API is. So configure course. We have to add this to our dependency injection in the API, which is one of our resources. So let's go to the startup and configure services, service authorization. Let me add this one. Now, okay, so this defines a course. Let me read just a little bit about this course, because I don't even know how to call it right now. So, course. Cross-region resource sharing is a mechanism, it's not a protocol. It's a mechanism that uses additional HTTP headers to tell browsers to give a web application running at one origin, same origin policy, yeah, not same domain, but same origin. Good thing I'm reading this. Access to select resources from a different origin. A web application executes a cross-origin HTTP request when if it requests a resource that has a different origin domain, protocol, or port from its own. Okay, so this is the course. I'm gonna even copy this and put it here. It's quite long, but I'm gonna leave it as it is right now. Put some more lines maybe later. Okay, let me do it this way. So Okay, so that's it right now. So, and we have to do one more thing. Actually, to the startup, we have to add course default. We name this policy default. Now we have to use it in the pipeline. Use routing. After use routing, probably it should be added. So the same thing to allow course. Course, not course. That's it. So cross-origin resource sharing. Okay. And to avoid the same origin policy. Okay. Now we have to enjoy. Now we have to run our application. Now what I can do is say .NET run. .NET run, this is going to run on 5003 right now, and once it's running, actually we'll go there and check if it's running, but I'm not going to hit any buttons, I'm not going to click any buttons until I start Identity Server and our API. Okay, so the application is running. Now I'm going to need now another PowerShell. What I'm trying to do is just to copy the path so I don't have to change directory. So I want to say source ls. Okay, what I need is identity server, and I'm going to say .NET run. .NET run. Our identity server is running on port 5001. Let me see right now. 5001 if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so it's running already, and I need the API. I don't need the MVC, of course I can run it. I don't need the console. Of course I can run it again. Trash source, let me change to API, because our JavaScript application is gonna turn to the API and try to get resources from the .NET run. It's gonna communicate with the API. Let me make sure that everything is running before I close it. Okay, so this is running on 6001. Oh, let me see how everything looks in the browser right now. So if I try to log in, it's gonna redirect me to 5001, where my identity server is running, and I have two users here, Bob with password Bob and Alice with Alice password Bob. Of course, I can log in with Google. I don't have any troubles. And I have been redirected back to my callback, which on its turn redirects me back to the index page, and it says user logged in. Here we go, the log s hash blah 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 sit ID provider local password name Bob Smith, given name Bob, family name Smith, website bob.com. So I got all the information, and subject, this is the ID of Bob, which I have to use in my database if I have something local here. Now once I logged in, I'm logged in as Bob. Now I can on his behalf, actually I can turn to the API and click the API, and voila, 200. I get the response from the API. Now my JavaScript application actually communicates with the API, and it gets all the information. Expire issue, client ID, value, blah 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 blah. Okay, so now I can log out. Now the identity server is going to redirect me back, and it says user not login. Mamma mia, actually we did it, and it was fun. So that's it. Actually, let me take a look again at that tutorial, make sure that I didn't forget anything. Yeah, you know how the start of a JavaScript client application that uses IdentityServer for sign-out authentication calls to the web APIs. And our application is going to be application which is using the APIs as front-end applications, if I can call them like that. We're going to use MVC applications, or applications which are actually communicating with the live users. We're going to be using MVC application, Razor Pages application, which are web applications or mobile applications, or we can have server-to-server communication like we had in the first tutorial with the console application, which is running on another server, a totally different server. So this is the tutorial. Hopefully was helpful.